Lyra was a wolfless Omega in Neon Pack who was adopted by an Omega when she was a child. She was found loitering around the borders of the pack and was taken in by an Omega who later died years afterward. That was where Lyra's suffering began. She was hated by everyone in the pack and was called all sorts of names. She only had two friends, Orion and Freya, who could barely save her from the physical and verbal abuse of the pack members. This affected her self-esteem badly, and she worked as a maid in the pack house to earn a living. At the age of 20, and still unable to feel her wolf, she was nothing but a useless human, as everyone called her. She had already given up hope of ever finding a fairy tale love. One day, a party was held to celebrate the Alpha's birthday, and other prominent Alphas from different packs were invited. While serving at the party, Lyra began to feel something stir inside of her, and her feet led her to where Ronan stood. Ronan was the cousin of Alpha Kale, one of the most ruthless and powerful Alphas in history. Kale did not grace the event personally because he rarely made public appearances, so he sent his cousin in his place. Lyra stopped in front of him, and his mood changed. Before she could stop herself, she said the word that left everyone in shock. Mate. Even though she couldn't feel her wolf, she knew deep down that he was her mate. Ronan felt insulted that the moon goddess would disgrace him by mating him to an ordinary Omega and a maid. He stormed out angrily after raining insults on her and calling her a liar. His sister, Celine, who had come to the party with him, punctuated the insults by landing a slap on Lyra's face, accusing her of trying to snake her way into an influential family. Lyra became an object of mockery and was duly punished afterward for upsetting important guests. Hurt and ashamed, Lyra picked herself up with the help of her two friends. Orion and Freya had been her friends since high school. While Freya also worked at the pack house to repay a debt her family owed the Alpha, Orion was more comfortable and lived with his family. The day after the party, Lyra went to work as usual, and everyone was laughing and making funny noises. She ignored them and continued with her normal work until the head maid asked her to clean the room where the guests had stayed. She promptly obeyed, even with the pain she was feeling all over her chest. When she reached the room, she found her best friend Freya getting intimate with her supposed mate, Ronan. That was Ronan, a playboy and chronic womanizer. Lyra burst into tears because she never expected the betrayal from her best friend. On the spot, Ronan rejected her, adding more insults. She became the laughingstock of the pack, and Freya, who had always been jealous of her, joined in their assault. Now, Lyra was left with only Orion as a friend and supporter. She continued her life in the pack for the next couple of days, ignoring Ronan and Freya, which did not sit well with Ronan. He had expected her to beg him, but he was disappointed when she didn't. He also couldn't deny her beauty and unique scent, which he wanted to have a taste of. That was why, as she closed from work, he followed her to her house without her knowing. He caught up to her in a dark alley and tried to kiss her. When she turned him down flatly, he became enraged. No woman had ever turned him down, so he proceeded to use force. Just before he could have his way with her, a surge of power she had never felt before coursed through her. She grabbed his head and slammed it against the wall. His lifeless body dropped to the ground. She had killed him. Shocked at what she had done, Lyra stared at him. Then she heard his low breathing, and she ran to her house to get something. Anything. She returned a few minutes later with a first aid kit to see if she could revive him, but his body was gone. Shocked and terribly scared, she went back to her house. She convinced herself that he probably woke up and left, since he was still breathing when she left him. The next day, she went back to work, and everything was normal. Nobody was talking about anything, and she believed her life would go back to normal. A few days later, Ronan's body was found, but it was mutilated beyond recognition. The only means of identifying him was the family pendant around his neck. The news spread like wildfire, but there was no information about the cause of his death. Fear gripped Lyra again, but above that fear was confusion. Ronan was breathing, and his body was in perfect condition when she left him, making her wonder who was actually responsible for his death. Hearing the news, Alpha Keel came down to Neon Pack himself to find out the cause of his cousin's death, while Ronan's sister, Celine, rained fire and brimstone throughout the pack. She was the most devastated because he was her only family. Everyone who had come in contact with Ronan in one way or another was gathered for questioning. Even with fear burning strongly inside her, Lyra was able to answer every question, making it clear that she had never encountered him after the party. But when she met Cale, she felt the same familiar shift she had felt with Ronan. However, she dared not say anything, considering what happened the last time. Cale was a man sculpted to perfection by the Greek gods themselves. His looks were enough to make any woman swoon, but behind his appearance was a painful past that had made him cold and ruthless. His parents had been killed by a rival pack that had been at war with his pack for hundreds of years. The hatred between the two packs was so deep that they never crossed paths because whenever they did, lives were always lost. Cale met Lyra and knew instantly that she was his mate, but he hated Omegas. They were too weak in his eyes, and he couldn't believe that after years of searching he had finally found his mate, only for her to be an Omega. And to make things worse, she was wolfless. He said nothing because she did not know he was her mate, but something about the way she answered his questions felt strange. He decided to look into her. Lyra returned home that day, and just before she went to bed, she received an anonymous message. It read, "I know what you did to Ronan." Fear gripped her as the person sent another message with a picture of her standing over Ronan's body. Although the picture was unclear because it was dark, she knew it was her. Someone knew her secret. When she asked what they wanted, the person replied and told her to stand by her window and undress herself. She became even more afraid, knowing the person could see her. She looked at the picture again, and when she realized she could not be easily recognized, she decided she would deny it until the end. Because if the news got out she wouldn't see the next sunrise, no one would believe her if she said she didn't kill him. She made up her mind. She had to run. Waking up very early the next morning, even though she had barely slept, Lyra made a run for it. But she didn't get too far before she was captured by Cale. He knew something was wrong with her, and trying to run only confirmed his suspicions. He took her back to his pack, but did not tell anyone about his doubts, not even Celine. However, rumors began to spread. Thinking that her life was over, Lyra was surprised when she was kept in a room instead of being thrown into an underground dungeon like she expected. Celine became suspicious of Cale keeping Lyra because she knew how much he hated Omegas. This made her suspect that Lyra knew something about her brother's death. Cale questioned Lyra again, and she stood her ground, insisting that she knew nothing about Ronan's death. The threats from the stalker continued to come. One day, Cale got hold of her phone and saw the messages. This time, Lyra was certain her life was over. Cale invited the stalker over, and Lyra was shocked when she found out who it was. Orion. Her friend Orion had been in love with her for the longest time, but never had the courage to confess. Instead, he resorted to stalking her and happened to witness what happened between her and Ronan. He tried to use it against her to force her into sleeping with him. Cale demanded an explanation, and Orion immediately confessed everything, even showing him the picture to save his own life. Lyra almost lost control from fear, but that fear quickly turned into something else when, after Orion's confession, Cale separated his head from the rest of his body. Cale asked Lyra one final time. Out of fear, she told him everything. There was nothing left to hide. But what shocked Lyra even more was that instead of killing her, Cale softened. He told her to get ready for therapy so she could talk to a therapist. Cale believed his cousin was a big fool for raping his mate. Lyra had not gotten the chance to tell him otherwise, and he concluded that it happened, so she went along with it to spare her life. If Ronan was not already dead, Cale would have killed him himself. He killed Orion because he didn't want anyone to know about Lyra's involvement. He was ready to protect her. That was definitely not what Lyra had expected, and it left her even more confused. She didn't understand the man. One minute he was cold, and the next he was incredibly gentle. Even though Cale was eventually warming up to her, this did not sit well with his beta, Seraphine, who loved him and wanted to mate with him before Lyra came into the picture. She started her therapy while avoiding Celine and Seraphine, who disliked her for their own personal reasons. During her sessions, Lyra discovered that her therapist, Mira, was the sister of Celine's best friend who had committed suicide. Celine's best friend, Lyra, had taken her own life after she was brutally raped. This left Celine devastated. Cale and Lyra started growing even closer, and she fell in love with him, but she didn't have the courage to tell him. He loved her too, but he was not ready to accept it. As time passed, Celine began to suspect that Lyra was Cale's mate because of how close they were becoming. She brought it up to him one day, and he did not deny it. She also confronted him about her suspicion that Lyra was involved in Ronan's death. Cale opened up to her after making her promise not to hurt Lyra. Unknown to them, Seraphine had overheard their conversation. Instead of Celine becoming angry that her suspicion had been confirmed, she felt pity for Lyra when she found out that her brother had raped her. She began getting closer to Lyra, but the biggest question remained, who actually killed Ronan? In a bid to get Lyra out of the way, Seraphine took this new information to the Werewolf Council while Cale was away on business. Lyra was summoned, tried, and beyond reasonable doubt, it was confirmed that she had killed Ronan. She was sentenced to death by the whip. The news spread like wildfire. No matter how much Lyra pleaded her innocence, nobody believed her because there was no evidence. She was carried away and locked in a cell to await her punishment. Lyra was beaten brutally. But just before she gave up, Freya, her former best friend, arrived on time with evidence to prove that Lyra was innocent. She had taken the video recording that shocked the entire council. They watched as Celine killed her own brother. Celine hated her brother because the love of her life had died because of him. Celine and Lyra had been secretly in a relationship because they were afraid of coming out. Ronan had raped Lyra, which led her to take her own life. Ever since then, Celine's hatred for her brother grew, and she took the first opportunity she had to kill him. Since Celine was related to the Alpha, she was thrown into the dungeon instead of being killed. Cale returned and raised hell. That was when everyone, including Lyra, discovered that they were mates. Cale and Lyra became even closer after this, and they fixed a date for their mating ceremony. The night before the ceremony, Seraphine managed to invite Cale for a drink. She drugged him and took pictures of the two of them naked. She sent the pictures to Lyra and filled her head with all kinds of lies. Lyra was left heartbroken. Unable to face Cale after what she believed was his infidelity, especially after his promises that he would never have anything sexual to do with anyone, she ran away early the next morning. While on the run, Lyra was captured by an army of werewolves because she was found in their territory. She was taken to the powerful Lycan King, and just when she was asked to undress so they could check if she had any spy marks from another pack, they saw something they never expected. A small tattoo on her waist that extended to the top of her back. But it wasn't just a tattoo. It was the mark possessed by the descendants of the Lycan King. The Lycan King and his Luna became emotional when they discovered their long-lost daughter. There had been a war, and she had been abducted by their rivals and thrown into a different pack as a baby. No matter what they did, they could never find her. A celebration was held for the return of their daughter, and Lyra was treated like the princess she truly was. During the ceremony, the Lycan King infused his blood into her, and her wolf was activated immediately. For the first time in her life, she shifted. Lyra was overwhelmed with joy. Life began for her in the new environment, but her thoughts still returned to Cale. She found comfort in Dahlia, her personal maid who had become her best friend. Her life was going perfectly until her parents broke the news of her betrothal. Even before she was born, she had already been promised to the son of the Alpha of the neighboring pack, who was now the Alpha. Lyra was sad, but did not see much of a choice. Cassian was a good-looking and caring man, and she believed that she could fall in love with him over time. However, Dahlia secretly felt hurt because she had dared to have a crush on the kind-hearted Alpha whenever he visited. Meanwhile, Cale had searched the entire pack in search of Lyra. Soon, he received information about her whereabouts. But finding her was not easy because it was his rival pack, the same pack that had killed his parents, and they had never seen eye to eye. He heard that the Lycan King's daughter was getting married, and he took the huge celebration as the perfect opportunity to enter the pack unnoticed. He arrived with his guards on the day of the mating ceremony and discovered that Lyra was the bride-to-be. All hell broke loose when the Lycan King saw him. A huge fight between the two packs broke out. But just before Kale could kill the Lycan King, Lyra begged him to spare her father. The mating ceremony was postponed to a later date. The fight eventually died down and Kale dragged Lyra away. He questioned her choices and angrily she told him why she had left in the first place. Kale cleared the air and explained his side of the story. Lyra felt remorseful after hearing him. She explained why she was getting mated to Cassian and how she could not abandon her responsibility. Kale was devastated, but he refused to give up on her. He even went as far as forgiving the Lycan King for her sake. During the fight, Dahlia had been one of the casualties. She was badly injured, but could not heal herself because, just like Lyra before, she did not have a wolf. Lyra helped clean her wounds because Dahlia would have done the same for her. And as she cleaned the wound on Dahlia's back, she saw something that shocked her. The exact mark she had was on the exact same spot on Dahlia's body. Confused and shocked, Lyra took her to the Lycan King. Everyone was surprised. The Lycan King and his Luna had originally given birth to twins. One of them had been reported dead, with her body supposedly eaten by wild animals. But the person who had been given the responsibility to kill the child could not bring himself to do it. Instead, he gave her to a poor widow in the pack, who raised her until she eventually started working in the mansion as a maid. The entire family was reunited. The Luna recognized Dahlia as the older twin because of their different hair colors. Since Cassian had been promised the first daughter of the family, he mated with Dahlia, whom he had secretly liked for the longest time. Finally, Kale and Lyra became mates. The feud between Kale and the Lycan King came to an end because of their union. They all ruled happily together, but not before punishment was delivered to Seraphine. The end.